The divisional weekend, it's the rematch weekend. 4 games, all rematches from the regular season. We're going to break down each game here on Tuesday Judgments. Hey, how are you folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be alongside Clark Judge, our NFL columnist here on CBSSports.com. And Clark, let's start with the game that'll kick it all off. Tennessee and Baltimore. I was forgetting who was playing, so that's good. Divisional weekend is rematch weekend. All 4 of the games here, rematches from the regular season, and we're going to break down each one here on Tuesday Judgments. Hey, how are you folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be alongside Clark Judge, our CBSSports.com NFL columnist. And Clark, it all starts off with Tennessee and Baltimore on CBS, 4:30 on Saturday, so that's what we'll start with. First game they met this year, 22 points scored, 13-9. It was a late victory for the Titans. What will be the key for a team to score more than 13 this weekend?
Well, to me, it's turnovers. I mean, if you're Tennessee, you cannot turn the ball over. You can't do what Miami did last week and what everyone's been doing down the stretch. And that's easier said than done. But Baltimore forces you into mistakes. And Kerry Collins does have a history, not this year, but has a history of making mistakes. So if Tennessee can avoid those mistakes, I think they're okay. But in terms of scoring, no, I don't think there can be a lot of points in this game because I'm not sure how Baltimore solves that defense.
Is there anybody in the NFL, speaking of Baltimore's defense, playing better than Ed Reed right now?
No, not right now. I mean, James Harrison's not playing. So, but no one's playing better than Ed Reed right now. In fact, I think if you were to hold that Defensive Player of the Year vote now, Ed Reed might get a lot more votes and maybe even win that thing. But he's been a monster lately. You know, interceptions every game. It seems like 2 interceptions every game. He's the key to that defense. Ray Lewis is the guy who holds everyone together, but Ed Reed's making the big takeaways.
3 straight games with at least 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
All right, you talked about James Harrison. The Steelers will get that opportunity on Saturday to play the Chargers. Rematch of that funky 11-10 Pittsburgh victory early. Injuries on both sides. Big Ben, obviously, he said he's going to play. LT for the Chargers doubts whether he's going to play. But let's talk about Darren Sproles here because he was the X factor in the win against the Colts. How does Pittsburgh and James Harrison make sure that Sproles is not the X factor in this game?
Well, I'm not sure you can make sure that he's not the X factor. I do think he's an important part of what they do, but you're going to have Troy Polamalu watching this guy. I mean, bring him up. The problem here is that San Diego can throw. I mean, Phillip Rivers is passing very well right now. Sproles is a guy who's electric. He's quick, he's small, he ducks behind the offensive line. I mean, you can't really see him, but Pittsburgh's going to have to stack the box some of those times and bring Polamalu down. That, I think, at least can minimize the damage. But as I said, if you catch them with 8 men down, you're going to get somebody open there, and Phillip Rivers can beat them. Although Phillip Rivers' worst performance this year was against Pittsburgh.
Was at Pittsburgh, and we'll see what the weather is come Sunday here. That game also on CBS. Let's switch over to the NFC, and we'll start with Arizona and Carolina. Clark, when you look at this game, Arizona's defense coming in has some confidence because they played well against Atlanta last week. But nobody has stopped D'Angelo Williams, and they didn't do it earlier this year. How do they stop him and make Jake Delhomme be the guy that has to beat him?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that other than to say, you know, what you do is you make Jake Delhomme beat you. You know, basically it's the same sort of thing. Stack the box and say, okay, we're going to gamble that you're not going to beat us. D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, I'm not sure we can do anything about that, but we're going to try to make sure we do, and we're going to gamble and say that Jake Delhomme can't beat us. That, to me, is their only recourse. Remember, Carolina doesn't lose at home. I mean, and Arizona doesn't win east of the Mississippi, so it's a very tough situation for the Cardinals. But they played them tough the first time they're there, and I know Ken Whisenhunt believes they could have won that game. You sell your team that, and you go in and say, listen, this time we can get them.
Yeah, they had the lead. They blew the lead.
Yeah,
so, I mean, they definitely were in front of Carolina, and they had a big lead in that game as well. We'll see how that one plays out on Saturday night. Meanwhile, for Sunday, this one's maybe the most intriguing of the matchups heading in, Clark, because everybody's talking about the Giants and the Eagles round 3. Round 1, Giants ran for more than 200 yards on the Eagles' defense. Round 2, the Eagles and Brian Westbrook had a field day against that Giants defense in a game that wasn't as close as the final 20-14 score. What will be the key to round 3?
Well, to me, the key to round 3 is the same thing as the key to round 2. They've got to, and I'm talking about Philadelphia, they've got to shut down this running game. Now, the difference in that second game from the first, no Plexico Burress. And what they did was they took one of the defenders, defensive backs, that was covering Plexico Burress and doubling him, and they brought him down low and said, okay, we're going to shut down Brandon Jacobs. We're going to shut down Derek Ward. and let's see if you can beat us with the wide receivers you've got. Amani Toomey doesn't really scare us. Steve Smith doesn't really scare us. And that's what happened. I mean, they got 80-some yards rushing, and they were so effective doing that, and it laid the blueprint for what was to come. Other teams were doing the same thing. It sounds simple, but to me, what happens now is Kevin Gilbride, it's up to Kevin Gilbride to make the adjustment, because you know what Jim Johnson's going to do. He's going to blitz in some situations, and he's going to bring a lot of heat. He's going to stack the box and say, beat us with Eli Manning, so do it.
All right, real quickly on the other side there, because defensively, obviously, Giants very stout defensively as well. The Eagles had some problems protecting Donovan McNabb in that win against Minnesota. When you talk about protecting him against the Giants, are you nervous?
Yeah, I am nervous, because you've got Justin Tuck, you've got 2 weeks these guys have had chances to recover, they're healthy. And they've got a lot of mismatches. Justin Tuck's a mismatch for anyone up front. And you remember what happened, last year with Hugh Manura when he was going against Justice. That's not the case here. But they do have some concerns at the tackle positions. I mean, there was a lot of pressure brought on Donovan McNabb last week in Minnesota. They've got some ability here to bring pressure from the outside, and I think they will. And I think they're going to say, we saw what the Vikings did. We're going to do it too. We think we've got a better player than Jared Allen and Justin Tuck. See if you can stop him.
All right, speaking of the Vikings, real quickly, on Monday they announced that they are going to bring back Brad Childress and the rest of his staff. Thoughts on that?
No surprise there. I mean, we talked about it last week, and I said I do think that he deserves a chance because he got him into the playoffs, and that's the key with Ziggy Wilf. He said, got us to where we haven't been before, give him a chance. He's got to solve that quarterback position.
Yeah, and Gus Frerotte this week has reported throughout the nation that he was upset that he wasn't in that game. We'll see if I wouldn't expect Gus to be with the Vikings next year. Thoughts on Eric Mangini to the Browns if it happens?
Well, if it happens, I mean, they're going to have to get their general manager set first, I think. And if they get George Kokinis, they're not going to talk to George until Sunday. If they get George Kokinis in there and they like what they see, yeah, I think that makes a really nice match because they want a GM and a head coach who get along. But there's still some interest in Scott Pioli. If Scott Pioli's in there, there's no Eric Mangini.
And Scott Pioli had a very good interview with the Kansas City Chiefs, so we'll see if that plays out. One last quick thing here. If Scott Pioli does go to the Chiefs, what's that mean for Herman Edwards?
Adios.
Adios. All right, well, 2 wins. There you go. All right, we'll see how it all plays out. Clark Judge, thank you very much, sir. Be sure to watch the End Zone, our playoff edition here on CBSSports.com. We'll talk X factors for each of these 4 games this weekend. For Clark Judge, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care, folks.